If you want to go without it, that's perfectly
Can I
fine.
just
I'm not
click
a PowerPoint girl at all. I choose not to use that very intentionally.
Yeah, I might just leave it and see how we go.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right.
Alrighty, so I'll also give you a 5-minute mark when we're wrapping up. So I'll do that through a private message through Zoom, so it just comes to you.
Sure.
It'll just take me a couple of minutes right now.
Mm-hmm.
What did I just do?
Let's just see if I can share the screen because I had trouble with it. If I go to, so I just go to share screen, desktop.
Yeah, if you just click share screen, yeah, down below.
Yeah.
So we'll just test it.
Desktop. If I click that.
And it is sharing your screen. Yep, it's sharing your screen. So that's fine. And again, you might want to jump in and out of that. That's fine. You'll need to jump out of that back to that other view that we just had. That's it for me to put us into the live stream. So just give me 2 seconds. This will just take me a minute. Just drop us into the live stream. Then I'll just intro you and hand it over to you.
Sure, thank you.
Person before you just spoke about biofield and electromagnetic health. So that was really interesting and a good precursor, I think, to what you're going to talk about. Okay, fantastic. So I can see us, which means we must be live on Facebook. So a massive hi to everyone, whether you're joining us through Zoom and you've booked ahead and you've got your Zoom link. Hi if you're on Zoom. If you are on Zoom, just to let you know, please feel free to use the webinar chat. And we'd love to hear if you have a contribution to make, if you're agreeing to something, disagreeing. Susan may ask you some questions that she would like you to answer as we go through. So if that is the case, you'll put your answers straight into the Zoom webinar chat. If you have a specific question that you want to make sure gets addressed before the end of Susan's session, that one will go in the Q&A box. And hi to everybody over in Facebook land as well. And for those of you who don't know, this is our very last presenter of our SuperHuman Summit. So if you are just joining us right at the end, we have had 40 speakers over 8 days. So Susan is speaker number 40.
Lucky me.
Lucky you. Da-da-da-da. And we have people who have spoken about becoming superhuman from such a different range of perspectives. But I think I'm super keen to hear what you have to share with us, Susan, because you know, your health and well-being and how you're processing stress and the tools and the resources you have to deal with that are perhaps the thing that gives you the most success or the least success in your life. So before I forget, I'm going to read out your whole title to your talk, which is Pressure Proof: Harness the Power of Pressure to Dial Down Stress and Boost Your Health and Happiness. And if you are already online and you would like to boost your health and happiness, drop a yes down below in the chat box so that we know you're in the right place. I'm going to hand you over to Susan now, and enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for joining, everybody. It looks like we've got some international people. Abu Dhabi, which is sort of my part of the world, my Middle Eastern background. Love seeing that. So I'm a clinical naturopath and a self-leadership expert, and I know that stress and I know that pressure situations or high pressure situations are definitely things that we can not get around and tend to be happening in our day-to-day life. And want to really come at this from a biochemistry sort of perspective so that we can get a bit of an understanding of what's going on in our bodies when we are in high pressure situations, and what we can be doing in our downtime in the meantime in order to ensure that when we do face high pressure situations, we are well equipped, and so we have the padding we require to be able to handle those situations to the best of our ability. So I'll share my slide deck with you and get started.
And as Susan's speaking, as we're going along, feel free to drop in a question if you have any questions about what Susan's saying, and we'll make sure that we get to them before the end of the session.
Sure. Okay. So I just thought I'd start with this guy. As a young person, did collect a lot of NBA cards and followed the NBA. And I don't know if a lot of you have tuned into the amazing Netflix documentary that's playing at the moment about the Chicago Bulls. And it was all around the Michael Jordan era and what a superstar he was for his time. And I've followed a little bit of LeBron James's journey as well. And I heard him get interviewed by Tim Ferriss probably around 18 months ago. And he and his nutritionist and personal trainer were interviewed and talking about how he stays on top of his game. Now, LeBron James is arguably one of the best NBA players in the league. They compare him to Michael Jordan all the time. And for the last 17 years as a professional NBA player, he has really maintained consistency and high performance. And what I loved hearing him talk about was the number one thing that helps him maintain that level of performance and be able to deal in high pressure situations when he's on the basketball court is his consistency in recovery. So he makes recovery 50% of what he does. He spends $1 million a year on his well-being. And I was really pleased to hear that, you know, his main guy, Mike, is constantly checking in to see on a daily basis, how much sleep have you had? Are we getting the right nutrition into you? How hydrated are you? You know, his food intake's all about really good quality food, energy in, energy out, and a lot of movement, a lot of stretching. And so he was talking about how he needs to try and aim for 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night. And it was refreshing to hear him say that, because I think for a really long time, high performance individuals were being busy, sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, being a grinder, like it was this badge of honor. And I think what's slowly happening is people are beginning to understand the importance of prioritizing your physical, mental, even spiritual well-being in order to be able to deal with the inevitable adversities, the inevitable high pressure situations and high stress lifestyles that a lot of us live. So I just thought I'd start with him because he's such an inspiration and, you know, a really great example of, you know, an elite athlete that really takes his well-being seriously.
I just want to quickly comment, sorry, before you keep going. I just want to quickly comment on what you said about sleep, because I agree. I've seen and I've worked with so many people that seem to, as you said, they wear it as a badge of honor about the fact that they hardly get any sleep every night. And I just wonder if those humans actually lived their same life with more sleep, what difference they would actually notice in their world.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, I've spent the last 20 years of my life really focusing on my own well-being, and I think what you could do in your 20s and your 30s is very different when you get to sort of your 40s. And I wish back then I had prioritized my sleep more. And I will talk more about sleep as we get further into this webinar. But I think you're right. You know, if you don't know what you're missing till you give it a go and start being consistent about it. So yeah, I think it's the one thing I've learned sometimes, and particularly with the situation we sort of find ourselves in at the moment in isolation, you know, we're more stressed, probably finding we're in more high pressure situations, but in a different way, whether we're homeschooling our kids or trying to be productive, working from home. It can look like so many different things, but what we need to really do is just make sure that the sleep's in place, and even the nutrition can go out the window. And if we're comfort eating, you know, there are biochemical reasons for that, but really making sure that we're getting adequate sleep and good quality sleep. And that is
That's the non-negotiable, isn't it, of performance?
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. And so the other thing I wanted to just mention was that so many of the people I've worked with, and you know, people that you speak to, when they talk about being under pressure with a deadline, or having to meet with a stakeholder, or just having to leave the office at 3 p.m. and go and get your kids from school to make sure they're not going to be crying out the front of the school because you got stuck in traffic, that response your body's having time and time again to pressure can often just end up feeling like overwhelm. And so that breeds anxiety, that breeds, you know, less padding, less capability to be able to deal with stress as it comes up. And when those high pressure moments happen, you know, we know that it can be a good thing in little bursts, but not a great thing constantly. So I think, just want to have a look. Sorry, my cursor's not working.
Can you manually do it, or?
I got there. Okay, and so what we want to do is avoid the moments of overwhelm, and it's what we do when we're not in our high stress state that helps us be able to tap into being well equipped when we're in that moment. And we know when research has been done on how we perform under pressure, that we are not our best version of ourselves. I know some people kind of do the procrastination thing to create a really tight deadline for themselves because they work well with that kind of pressure, but not everyone is genetically equipped to be that person, and there are specific genetic mutations that or genes expressing in a certain way that tell us whether we are prone to high adrenaline, being a low adrenaline type, or even just sort of, you know, being really well balanced in the middle. And we know that adrenaline and dopamine are very connected, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment too. But what we want to kind of differentiate is the difference between eustress, which is a good kind of stress. It's, you know, our body was built and equipped to be able to do eustress, and that's where we go, this is really good in the short term, this stress is motivating me, helping me focus, creating energy, giving me that adrenaline release to get into the zone, get excited about something, improve my performance, but then it's got to stop and not be a constant state of being. Whereas distress is a sort of a negative connotation around stress, where it actually can be short or long term, but it's creating an anxiety, overwhelm kind of situation. And we don't perform very well at all. In fact, we can sometimes find ourselves feeling quite angry or frustrated, out of control, kind of tapping into that amygdala, that lizard brain, and being really reactive rather than responsive. So we want to try and sit in eustress. And I think there's two parts to how we do that. It's about perception of our stress, whether we go into a situation that we would term stressful, and ask ourselves, am I excited to be doing this webinar with Michelle today, or am I feeling anxious about it because I might have trouble speaking publicly? I don't know. So it's all about how you
I won't ask you how you're feeling. It's all right, Susan.
No, I'm excited. So it really does. It does help to check in with yourself and just see what that feeling is behind it. And whether it feels good or not, and then to also be mindful of how much stress have I been under and for how long, for that to influence how I do stress, how I do high pressure situations as well. So I really like the quote by Ernest Hemingway that talks about having grace under pressure. And I think if we can be gracious, we're able to better cope, better navigate our way through things, come out the other side of it and feel like we did a relatively good job of dealing with it. So I want to really focus in today, like I mentioned earlier with the LeBron James example, of the importance of 4 main areas for helping us be able to deal with high pressure situations. And it really is the importance of prioritizing recovery. So in our non-stress times, making sure we're eating well, making sure we're regularly exercising, prioritizing sleep, and working on balancing our biochemistry to help us create a healthy stress response to everything that kind of comes at us. So what I think is really important is doing as much as you can to balance your biochemistry and support that. So when we look at our stress response, or what happens when we get into a high pressure situation, is our brain's hypothalamus gets activated. We get this activation of our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response. It's that run away from the saber-toothed tiger, or try and fight the saber-toothed tiger response that we have. So blood runs to the periphery, muscles get activated to get going, our digestion shuts down, our urinary tract, our reproductive system is offline because no one's stopping to have sex or go to the toilet. And so what we want to do is have bursts of fight or flight, but not be in a constant activated fight or flight response. Because once we've activated that fight or flight, we're out of rest and digest, which then causes this cascade of hormones to be released, where we end up with adrenaline and noradrenaline being released, and then we see cortisol, our stress hormone, also released from our adrenal glands. And so the body thinks it's on the edge of a cliff. It doesn't think we're just trying to get that car park at the shopping centre and someone's just cut us off. It's having the same physiological response, even to something psychologically that can be a little bit minor in the grand scheme of things. So what we want to really do is harness the pressure situations, have short bursts of that fight or flight response to help us be productive, to help us get through tricky situations, and then to go back into rest, digest, relax, and let that pendulum kind of swing the other way.
Yeah, and can you just briefly talk to, and you can do it now or later,
Sure.
but a couple of the earlier presenters were talking about your body's biochemistry and the ability to produce dopamine and serotonin being our natural drug factory. So instead of having to actually take all the medication that we collectively take around the world, if we were actually much more in tune with the way that our bodies generated those biochemicals, we could be a bit more strategic in using them.
Absolutely. And I think, you don't need to go off and study nutritional biochemistry, but there are just a few really great questions that you can ask somebody to get a really good idea about whether they're low serotonin or prone to low dopamine, prone to low GABA, acetylcholine, all these neurotransmitters that help us feel happy, balanced, calm, motivated. And so, just as an example, serotonin's 3 major roles in the body are to ensure that we regulate our appetite, we regulate our sleep, and we regulate our mood. So if I speak to a client, for instance, and trying to kind of work out what that aggression that they're facing at the moment is all about, I'm like, is this an adrenal thing? Is this stress? I'll also say, so, are you carb craving? Like, do you want to eat lots of sugary food? Because that gives you a little serotonin hit and you start to self-medicate through what you eat. Are you having trouble sleeping? Because, you need great serotonin in order to have melatonin, our sleep hormone. And so you start to get this picture and you solve this little puzzle around what neurotransmitters are hyper-functioning, or, what are we in deficit for, to work out, well, if we're low on serotonin, let's look at that biochemical pathway. Let's look at the nutritional cofactors that help us make more of it. And a lot of times we're able to put in vitamin B6 and tryptophan from protein and get the body making it in a sufficient way to not have to lean into using things like, SSRI, antidepressants. So a lot of people don't realize that there is this whole world of nutrients that are there to support your biochemical processes before you lean into taking the pharmaceutical option.
There's a pharmacy inside all of us.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, Michelle. I think it's just about educating people so they know what their options are. And I think it really saddens me that a lot of people don't know. So, my mission's about getting the word out so people can feel more empowered to be able to be their best version of themselves and know that they can work with their body rather than kind of, adding in things to try and just band-aid a situation in a sense. So with regard to our stress response, which can often play a role in our mood, it'll often play a role in how we're able to cope with what's on our plate, our busyness, our positive occupation. Someone told me being busy feels like being positively occupied, if you want to put a good spin on it. What can happen is over time, we can become, I don't like using the word adrenally fatigued, but, we can get to burnout. And, and in the initial stages of going into high stress, high pressure situations, we'll see our adrenals hyperfunction. So they'll release lots of cortisol, and our hormones that help us balance our stress response will also kind of rise. But over time, and this is really common in people when they're sort of getting into their fourth and fifth decades, we've done many years and worn many hats, being lots of things to lots of people, or we've experienced trauma, or, life just happens. They say the 10,000 joys, the 10,000 sorrows. Those sorrows build up and it wears us down. And so we can end up seeing, and I see this routinely, seeing people in middle age, particularly women, who have got very low stress hormone production going on, and they've just tapped out. They have done stress to the max in the past and there's not a whole lot left. And so in that situation, we're really working at rebuilding their adrenal gland, particularly at a time when our estrogen and progesterone starts to come down because we're going into perimenopause or menopause, and we rely on our adrenal glands, which just sit above our kidneys at our lower back, to be able to create the little bit of estrogen that helps us get through that transition. So when we are getting hot flushes and we're an insomniac and we're just irritable and we're all over the shop, quite often that adverse kind of experience, that bad experience of menopause, has come about because of the decades of stress that we did before, too many high pressure situations that have left us quite depleted. So we need to assess that. I think it's really important to speak to your health professional, test your hormones, look into where do I sit on that spectrum? Am I hyper functioning and I need to calm things down? Or am I so depleted I need to rebuild things up? So that's a really important thing to ascertain, because you can't get on to Dr. Google and go, oh, licorice is really great for stress. It's an adaptogenic herb and it really helps with building up a stress response. It's also a herb that will increase the half-life of your cortisol. And if you're producing a whole stack of that the second you get up in the morning, you're going to make it worse. So it needs to be looked at.
So you have to understand, just to let you know, someone's just saying, excited to have this topic explained so well and with very clear strategies that anyone can take action on. So
Yeah.
good on you, Susan. Bring it on. People are loving it.
Oh, great. So I'm just going to talk about the basics around foundations of health and what we need to be doing in order to ensure that we are creating that base that is going to give us the strength, the resilience, the ability to go into stress and high pressure without losing it, with a gracious experience of it, because it's not always a very pleasant and comfortable experience for people.
I love the fact that you're combining the word gracious with stress. That really, to me, that gives me this picture that's beautiful. I like that combination.
Yeah, I try to do it. It doesn't always happen.
Makes it sound so elegant, you know, instead of so kind of hair pulling.
Yeah. Life goals. Gracious.
Yeah, totally.
So nutrition, it's huge, you know, where we can do it as often as possible. But I'm going to speak particularly about things to do to help balance your cortisol levels. So first things first, we cut out sugary foods, because there's this whole hormone interplay that goes on when we have our fight or flight response. We kind of get that boost of sugar into our bloodstream to give us the energy to run away or to fight something that's our danger. And what most of us do is we still sit in our car being road raged or in traffic. We don't run around the block and burn that sugar off. So as we get older, we start to see insulin resistance, pre-diabetic kind of state, and we get this lovely kind of spare tire around the middle look, which is so nice. And if you're finding that you're getting that spread across the tummy and you're like, I eat well, I exercise, like, I don't understand this, like, first get your thyroid checked. But usually that spread is all around way too much stress, and that's been that adrenal response that's causing that. So sugary foods need to go, and it can be really tricky. Like, I know I'm either on the wagon or off the wagon when it comes to sugar. And I know when I'm craving it that I need to have a meeting with myself and check in and see what's out of balance. Like, am I low on energy? Am I low on serotonin right now? What is that about? So instead of sugar, when you crave carbs, eat protein. So if I want to have my husband made a beautiful custard, apple and walnut cake yesterday from scratch, as everyone's kind of baking at the moment. Instead of having that for afternoon tea, I'll have a boiled egg and avocado on a rye Vita or something, just to keep me satiated till I get to dinner. A plant-based diet's really important. We want to try and eat as much real nutrient-dense food, and we want to make sure it's a protein-replete diet. So in order to make adrenaline and noradrenaline, tyrosine is the amino acid that helps us make that. It also helps us make dopamine. It's a backbone for making that. And tryptophan for serotonin, glutamine for making GABA, which keeps us calm and not anxious. When you look at all those neurotransmitters, that pharmacy in your body that you speak of, Michelle, they all have an amino acid base. So whether you're a vegetarian or a vegan, like you can do it through plant-based protein, but it's just so easy if you're doing eggs.
One of our other speakers, who's an Ayurvedic practitioner, was talking about how the vast majority of those neurotransmitters actually originate in your gut. So if you're starting to say, okay, where do I begin in this whole journey of nutrition? Well, the gut's going to be a pretty safe place to begin for a whole range.
Absolutely, yeah. I did a talk a training module for some GPs, integrative doctors and psychiatrists last year, that was all around the role of gut health and diet quality in mental disorders, and that she's absolutely right. So that's why plant-based diet's so important, to get that fiber that feeds your beneficial bacteria that then helps us actually make those neurotransmitters in the gut as well. We make them there too. We want to The protein part of it's really interesting. There's a great book by Dr. Alan Christensen called The Adrenal Reset Diet. And in it, he postulates, and they did studies around this where they found if you were eating protein at breakfast, it was helping anchor your cortisol levels in the morning, and you reserved your carbohydrates, i.e. good quality grains, whole grains, for the evening to also have a really nice kind of anchoring effect on your stress hormones. So, eggs, protein powders in smoothies, nut granolas with yogurt and berries, they're all really good options in the morning, just to make sure you're not waking up if you're that type of person that's like, instant coffee's not instant enough and go, 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 and you're kind of a bit borderline neurotic. That's telling me that spike in cortisol that we get about an hour after we wake, which is called your cortisol awakening response, is overshooting. You're doing way too much. So we want to kind of bring that down and just chill out with protein. So that's really important. And I find people, when they sort of get onto that, they find that egg breakfast, that omelette with the veggies in it, gets them through to lunch, and it's fantastic. And they're balanced, like their blood sugars aren't all over the shop with a sugary cereal-based brekkie or just toast.
Do you, or you might be already planning to cover this, but can you just talk to just super briefly the role of fasting, intermittent fasting?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I love it. And I think, we don't live in we do live in constant feast mode now, but historically we have had times of famine or very little food, and cultures that fast, like it's Ramadan at the moment, are a really good example of how we can go long periods of time without eating. And I myself I routinely do the fasting mimicking diet by Dr. Longo, the Prolon, every quarter. And it's a really good way to kind of reset your cells, kill off cells that are not working, create new stem cells, even, help normalize your cholesterol and your fasting blood glucose levels so you can reverse diabetes. But that's all got to be done with a health practitioner supervising you. If you're the type of person that's got that really high stress response on rising, that's like, go a million things, and it's all a bit over the top, and you test those morning cortisol levels on blood or saliva, you are not a candidate to be fasting until midday. So quite often people will go, I do a bulletproof coffee and I don't start eating till 1 p.m. And then I sort of close the window on that by 9 p.m. and you're doing 16 and 8. So 16 hours of fasting, 8-hour window to eat. That doesn't really work, because we're just drawing on that adrenaline response. And what that's doing is it's kind of going to put you into that burnout situation longer term for most people. So in that situation, I find those people are better off eating within half an hour of rising, anchoring their cortisol, anchoring their blood sugars, and then cutting that window off late afternoon, and still observing that window and having had enough of what they needed to eat. So you sort of flip it. You don't do it in the morning as such. You'd fast from the afternoon onwards.
And where's the best place for people to go to get more information on fasting?
So Michael Mosley's talked about this. So Volta Longo's got a really great book called The Longevity Diet, which talks about this fasting mimicking approach. I think Michael Mosley sort of touched on this as well. I've just sort of picked it up along the way through my own professional training, that you attend conferences and hear professors and people speak about this. So I think they would be two good authors to start with.
Great, thank you for that.
Cool. So vitamin B5 and vitamin B6 are two particular B vitamins that help us maintain a healthy stress response. And so we're going to get a lot of B6 and B5 from our animal protein sources. So, your chicken, your salmon, your beef, sweet potatoes, bananas, and also having more of your vitamin C rich foods which are really important because we've got a really high concentration of vitamin C in the adrenal glands. Each time we're kind of pushing out a stress response and releasing cortisol, we chew through that vitamin C. So people sort of think of citrus as being the main thing, but the zest in your citrus is really high in content of vitamin C. But even eating kiwi fruits and strawberries, broccoli, tomatoes, capsicum, they're also really high in vitamin C too. So that would be quite good to try and incorporate more of that into your daily diet. And then also focusing on foods that are rich in magnesium. So cocoa has got a really high amount of it, carob, seeds, nuts. Try and make sure they're raw so that we're not getting that change in the oils, but also focusing on eating sesame seeds, tahini, seaweed. They're all really great ways to kind of get magnesium in through the diet. However, if you know that you are cramping, twitching, feeling really tense and tight in the muscles, getting magnesium through the diet alone probably won't cut it. So you would probably need to look at a good quality supplement. And there are lots of different types of magnesium out there. If you're prone to being a bit anxious, having trouble with sleep, getting a bit of the mood stuff kind of going on, magnesium glycinate is really beautiful because glycine helps calm the nervous system. Otherwise, magnesium citrate's great. And just start low, build up, have it away from food. And just watch for bowel tolerance because it relaxes muscle. So some people will find they can get a looser stool with it. Any questions on that in the chat? Or
yeah, as we're talking with Susan, please feel free to drop questions in. There's a question on sleep, but I'm waiting until you talk about sleep.
Yeah, well, there it is. So I do think sleep is king, and I can just talk about sleep all day. And there are lots of reasons why prioritizing sleep is so important. Our adrenal glands will only do recovery during sleep. So we need to be getting enough in order to kind of, recharge our stress response for the next day when we have to face the high pressure situations that inevitably come up. Sleep is really important.
Great question up the front, and you can answer it if that's right. Okay. What constitutes good sleep? So I guess good sleep versus bad sleep, or the quality of sleep.
Yeah, so people are doing a lot of the wearables like your Fitbits and your Garmins and things, and I use them as a guide, but I don't feel like they're super accurate. We want to be aiming for, good 2 hours of deep sleep. 2-3 hours is ideal. Most people don't even hit an hour or an hour and a half of deep sleep a night. Nick Littlehales wrote a really great little book called Sleep. He's an elite athlete sleep coach. So he coached the English cycling team and some of their soccer teams, Premier League soccer teams. And he talks about the importance of finishing a sleep cycle. So each sleep cycle takes an hour and a half. And he talks about going down the stairs through the different stages of sleep, then getting right to deep sleep, getting good REM sleep, which is your dream sleep, and then kind of coming back up. And you want to really try and aim to finish a cycle. So you want to kind of go, well, it can be anywhere between 4 and 6 cycles each person needs a night. And for some, it'll be 4, but others need 6. So playing around with it and going, am I good with 5? Does that feel like I'm rested? So the barometer for good quality sleep is, do I wake and feel rested? Do I actually feel energized when I get up, or am I waking up tired? Because sometimes you can be sleeping 9 hours a night really consistently and you are tired because you've actually got sleep apnea and you don't realize that you're stopping breathing and not getting oxygen in multiple times an hour. So it really is an area that can be explored vastly. I find myself getting clients diagnosed with sleep apnea a lot. And so, you just got to cut the pieces of the puzzle together to work out why they're not sleeping well.
But I
But
think the upshot to that is if you are waking in the morning and you're not feeling like you have the energy to face the day, then there's something wrong with the quality of sleep you're getting in some form or another, and you should be digging into that and working out what those issues are.
spot on, Michelle. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is to prioritize that sleep you get before midnight. So that's going to be the most restorative. That's what's going to give you that time for you to lay down memories, take whatever's on the USB stick that you learnt that day and pack it away onto your hard drive. And so there can be so many different causes of why we don't sleep well. Matthew Walker's got a sleep center in the States, in California, and this book that he wrote is an international bestseller. It's a fantastic book, worth reading if you do struggle with sleep, because it does give you some pointers. I'm going to run through some of them. But they ran a study where they had their participants have just one night of 4 hours of sleep, and their natural killer cell activity, these are the white cells that fight viruses and bacterial infections, their activity dropped by 70%, and that was just a one-off. So sleep deprivation is a horrible thing and we want to try and avoid it. And I know I feel grumpy, and chronic loss of sleep causes weight gain because you've got these fluctuations in hormones like ghrelin and leptin, and so we can see people's lifespans can be even shorter if they're chronically underslept as well. So my top tips are to make sure that you try to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day, and really trying not to have caffeine after 1 p.m. So caffeine actually blocks a molecule called adenosine, and adenosine is really, it blocks the receptors for adenosine, and adenosine needs to kind of build up as the day progresses in order to get to its highest level for sleep onset and sleep maintenance. And adenosine is really important to get to there. So if we're drinking coffee and blocking its ability to rise, that can be the very cause of why we're not sleeping well. So some people can't tolerate caffeine at all, and that's just devastating for someone that lives in Melbourne that loves good coffee. And I would never tell anyone don't have it, but maybe you want to play around with it and go, is it for me? If I've been struggling with sleep for the last 5 years, 10 years, and it's still been a feature of my daily diet, do I need to maybe look at pulling it out?
I have to say, about 5 or 6 years ago now, I gave up drinking caffeine, and I was only drinking one coffee a day. And the really pleasant side effect that I hadn't expected was that it totally regulated my blood sugar. So I used to be 2 or 3 in the afternoon, mega munchies, got to eat or I'm going to die kind of a feeling. And when I stopped having caffeine, that entirely went. So I don't get that feeling at all anymore in the afternoon.
So interesting. Yeah, so you could possibly be carrying a gene mutation that means that you were a fast metabolizer, and then that was kind of increasing metabolism for you as well, to go, where can
I'm sure I've got more than one gene mutation, by the way.
Oh, we've all got lots. People get really taken aback when they see gene profiles when I'm running through them. They're like, oh, I'm a mess. And I'm like, no, I've got this. We've all got it. So the other thing is also just not drinking and going to bed tipsy. So try to kind of, one or two drinks and then wait 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, because alcohol is sedating. It helps us kind of get to sleep, but then we sober up during the night, and it also blocks our REM sleep, so that good quality sleep gets affected as well. And I think your liver just has to kind of work that little bit harder to detoxify it overnight, and that can be a little bit stimulating as well. And then the other thing is also just trying not to eat too soon before bed, because we just know that a late dinner kind of changes our heart rate variability, and it takes time for that to sort of settle down. So we just want to give it that time to kind of get to where it needs to in order to just get that regular rate happening for nice consistent sleep. And so, if you can't get away from that, just having a really light sort of brown rice, veggie, stir fry based meal that's going to be a little bit easier to digest and not too heavy is maybe a way around that.
Fantastic. So we've got a couple of minutes left and then we're going to go to questions. So just a heads up for everyone out there in Zoom and Facebook land. If you have a question for Susan in regards to anything we've spoken about, now is your time to drop it in.
Cool. I'll move on to movement. And I think I'm seeing lots of people out and about in green space because it's kind of all we're allowed to do at the moment, which is really encouraging. It's great. Look, exercise is going to really help us be able to clear that cortisol out of our system. It really is a stress management tool for a lot of people and a mood management tool. So they've done studies when people are, voluntarily engaging in exercise regularly, it's as effective as taking an SSRI antidepressant. So it lifts, it elevates our serotonin, it elevates our brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is this chemical made in our brain that helps it regenerate and stops us being Alzheimer's and dementia candidates. It's really great at producing anandamide and beta endorphins. So all of these really help lift our mood and give us that runner's high feeling afterwards. And it also helps us, reduce inflammation. So doing something every day, it can be riding, walking, running. I think if you're a high adrenaline type person, lots of running can just add to that. So high strenuous exercise like CrossFit is probably not your friend. You're probably going to be better off doing things like yoga, but that's a whole other conversation. And right now there is so much to access in terms of online stuff with us all at home. So check out, who's doing online yoga. I love Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube. And I do Les Mills because my gym is closed. So I've got their app for a little while. And Chris Hemsworth's got his Center app, which is really useful for nutrition and exercise and meditation. And the last thing really is hydration. So just making sure that we are not getting dehydrated. That can exacerbate feelings of anxiety and feeling out of control. Everybody's different. We don't all need 2 liters or 8 glasses. I think just watching what color your urine looks like when you're in the bathroom gives you a bit of a barometer for what you need. So aiming for straw yellow, not too dilute, not too concentrated. You're going to wake up in the morning and it'll always be concentrated, but just ensuring throughout the day that we're just not seeing a bright yellow unless you're on B vitamins. But using herbal teas, kombucha, soda streaming your water if you're not a water person, like they're all strategies and tips. Adding cucumber, adding mint, adding citrus slices or strawberries into your water. They're all ways to kind of getting that in. So I love drinking herbal tea at this time of the year as it cools down. So they're my tips and tricks. I think when you've got those things in place, you're pretty well placed. Of course, you could do a whole other talk just about mindset and meditation, which I'm sure people have touched on throughout the summit as well. But they will put you in a good place if you get those foundations right.
Absolutely. It's all about the foundations and then the top won't wobble down. That's what we know to be true. Yeah, if you're able to change the view for us back to the other one, there's 1 or 2 questions and then we will wrap up in time for the closing ceremony. So AJ is here right beside me in person. If you're wondering how she's magically appeared, well, it is all about being superhuman after all. So this is the question, and I'm going to paraphrase the question to say, what is the role of sleep in energy and being healthy?
Well, you've got to be well slept in order to feel energized, don't you? So I think, when you're skimping on that, you're going to feel pretty tired. So there's a lot of regenerating that goes on while we sleep. Our brain has what's called a glymphatic system, which is like a detox. It's like the brain gets a shampoo every single night while we sleep and clears all the gunk out that doesn't work for us any longer. It really helps us make energy at a cellular level. It helps us be able to do all our learning, our memory work. Our decision making is a lot clearer. You think about when you are sleep deprived, just trying to drive a car, we're groggy, our body, sleep has felt like a bit of a mystery, and why do we do it? But it has so much to do with regeneration and energy production. Yeah.
And I think I know for myself, other speakers have spoken about the idea of what non-negotiables that you have in your life. And for me, I sort of have this hierarchy of things. And the thing that is at the bottom of the hierarchy that is the most non-negotiable for any reason, for any purpose, is my sleep. I am religious about my sleep. Yeah. And because I know what my life is like if it's not there and if I don't have it and it's not pretty. So I make sure that it's the biggest priority in my world. So yeah, someone did ask about what barre was, and it is a type of dancing actually. And I don't know if you asked that because Scott Morrison asked the exact same question when he was making some announcements.
No, I did. I remember him saying that. Was quite funny. But my girlfriend owns a barre studio in Hawthorne here in Melbourne, and she within 36 hours of them being shut down and him making that speech, she had gone into online classes. So she's constantly at her studio recording herself, instructing her.
And now he knows what it is, so it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. So I think it's like a combination of ballet, dance, but strength training. So it's got a Pilates kind of feel to it as well. I've not done it. Everyone says it's really hard.
Yeah, I've heard it's hard. I've not done it either.
Yeah.
All right, let me just say a massive thank you to you. We appreciate your insight and your contribution, and we appreciate that in the fact that you were dealing with those core building blocks about what it truly is to be human, much less superhuman. You've left us at the end of the Superhuman Summit with a really great set of practical take-homes that we can put into place. And that's certainly what everyone is saying in the chat box, is how much they're appreciating the practical nature of what we're talking about, and also how easy it was to understand the way you explain it. So I think some of this stuff can be a bit complex and a little bit inaccessible sometimes. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you for putting it in a way that we can all understand it. And so for those of you who in 10 minutes time are ready, come over here, poke your head in. She's here. We're here. We're together. And we are having the closing ceremony at 4 o'clock. And a ceremony it is going to be. So if you haven't yet booked in, they can still go to the Human Power link with the /summit.
Correct.
To get into the closing ceremony. And don't forget that both Peter Dixon and Sister Gianti, and also Stephen Barclay, who has been organising our meditations, will be joining us at our closing ceremony.
And we're having an approved sugar-free kombucha.
Good work. I like to hear that.
Thanks again, Susan. We hugely appreciate it.
Thank you, ladies.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
10 minutes.